Welcome to this week's episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. Today, we are going to explore a little bit about Dallas, Texas, and our guest today is Pepsi Windland. So stay tuned. Pepsi Windland is a Senior Director of Account Management for Occupier Services Southwest Region. During her career, she has represented tenants specializing in corporate real estate portfolio account management, as well as transaction management, strategic renegotiation, acquisitions, and dispositions, and lease administration. She is also the founder of the Phenomenal Women's Scholarship in her hometown of Abilene, Texas, and serves on the board for the Women's Council of the Dallas Arboretum. She's a committee chair for the Daughters of the American Revolution, Greater Dallas chapter, and is a devout member of the Daughters of Texas Revolution, James Butler Bonham chapter. So that's quite a mouthful, and I'm really anxious to dive into all of those things. But let's start, Pepsi, with a little bit about your career and how you got to where you are today and what that looks like for you.
Perfect. And thank you, Karen. And I'm really excited to be here and honored to just speak about my path and share it with you and the audience. So I was somebody who bounced around a bit in my 20s, trying a number of different things, and took a little bit longer to graduate college because I had so many interests. And in my late 20s, I was actually working in recruiting. And it wasn't something that I was drawn to, but I liked people. So I knew it was people and the business of people that I always wanted to be in, which you could say that is, all of the things that everybody does when they're looking at. It's always all about people, essentially. But I was in the same building as a company called Transwestern and saw that they had a post for an admin, an executive admin. And at that time, I was more in a sales role. But I had no background in real estate, and I have a degree in PR. So I called in as a recruiter and then actually asked my boss at the time if I could flip into a candidate and if she would position me to become the candidate for this role. And she supported me, and I flipped into the candidate and had the interview with one of the most amazing women in the industry, Kim Butler, and her team. There were 5 other senior brokers. And that was my entry into commercial real estate. So I kind of created a little bit of a different, angle, but I thought this is an entry role. My skill set's different, but I can do this and I'm curious about it. And commercial real estate was interesting to me because of the people, the product, the business. It looked like the Wild West. And I like things that are hard and different and have a lot of variety. So they gave me the opportunity. And I moved into the role and I immediately got my license. I started asking what else I could do. And so working for 5 senior brokers, I was on the agency side. So I was the product side. They had Class A buildings and B, and they were in development. And I just started taking on whatever I could. So I would tour, show spaces, do my admin work, plan events. I got certified in Argus because I'm like, I want to also know this side of the business. So you will see a theme as we talk about, I love variety and I like being a part of a team, and I love plugging in where I can. So that is a little bit of a theme.
But that's a great theme. And, it's so funny because actually an interview I did recently with Coco Brown, we were talking about kind of the same thing as far as leaning in and recognizing that we have the ability to learn new things. Even, because a lot of women think that, I have to know everything before I apply for a role or, when I'm in a role. And, I agree with you. The most exciting thing about working was a variety of things to do, a variety of things to learn, always plugging in to see what fits with the big picture, right?
And, having that childlike curiosity is a part of it. And you also have to be willing to be humbled. because I will say that, as we get more into our careers and our ego shows up, it's a hard thing, right? To say, I don't know. And especially for women, depending on your industry, it is really important that we show up with that expertise because we have some dynamics playing against us, right? And I'm in a very male dominated industry, even though there are amazing women. And so coming up at the time I did, in the early 2000s, we were still wearing like suits. Like it was just a very black or white kind of a narrow like path. And so I think that's really important when you're like, I want to learn something, to say, okay, I'm going to fail a little bit. I'm going to have that learning curve, but the end game is that I want to be a part of this. And so that lens is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this was around 2000. I did this for about a year and a half and was growing. And then I got an opportunity from another lead broker to actually move to the tenant rep side, which she was doing national accounts, tenant rep work, which is representing tenants across multiple markets. So a different side of the business. And that was right around the time the market fell in the fall of 2008 that this happened. And so I chose to make the move to do that instead of staying with my team, which I took my career the path that I've stayed with at this point. And goodness gracious, that first year, trial by fire, a learning curve on a new team, national accounts. I was working multiple markets. So I go from my little insulated pocket of Dallas with product and my team to now I'm working all over the US in multiple cities with 7 different national accounts, different leadership roles, negotiating on a different side. It was one of the hardest years of my life.
And all in the middle. Oh, and don't forget, all in the middle of a financial crisis.
Yes.
Which real estate was definitely intertwined in that.
Yeah.
In that whole crisis. I mean, it was sort of at the center of it in some ways.
Yes. And resilience was built during that year, a lot of it. But I was in my late 20s. And just for speaking to women out there of whatever age, I think I always look at stress. I think a lot about stress and how it shows up in our lives. And I speak to that a lot. And we forget that we call certain stress into our life while other stress is happening that we have no control of. Right. And when I was younger, I would lose the framing about that. And I would become more of a victim mindset of, at that time of my life, I do a lot of work. I was pulling like 70-hour weeks to get things done because of the chaos that was happening in contraction with our clients and, just chaos. And now as I get older, that's one thing I think is so important, is having that grace for yourself, but also taking the step back and realizing, wait a minute, I asked for these things. I asked for this to come into my life. And being reminded of that changes your framing of stress. It then becomes a challenge, like to push against you, to mold you. And then you can kind of handle the things that are happening around you that aren't, something you ask for a little bit differently. I'm going to allow some grace. And that's my take on it. But I think that's really important, because when you're coming up and trying to figure out who you are in the industry, you can get lost in that and other people's roles and boundaries and what you should be doing. But when you have that frame of the long game and I asked for this, it can shift how you show up.
No, totally. And, it's interesting that you bring it up because, we're talking about one of the themes that you're talking about here is taking risks, putting yourself outside of your comfort zone and doing things that are unfamiliar. And one of the things that stress does to women that it doesn't do to men is stress tends to make us want to pull back, right? That the more stressed we are, the more we want to gather up the children and take them back into the cave to protect them, right? Mm-hmm. And ourselves. And that's a normal reaction. And I think it's really important, particularly for women, to be aware of that as a normal reaction, because then you can, to your point, mitigate it, recognize that, okay, this is going to be my impulse in a stressful situation, but is this really the right thing to do right now? And sometimes it is, there's no doubt that sometimes you need to pull back and protect yourself. But a lot of times we don't. And reframing that stress. I love how you reframe it that, yes, I asked for this. So maybe it kind of feels stressful, but it's really a challenge. It's really something that's positive. It's not someplace I need.
Well, that's a large thing. I mean, I would love to speak to that more in a minute, if you don't mind, about the negative side of how I showed up for myself and what it did to my career.
Yeah.
For a while, I got stuck. And that was like something that took a while to move out of. And then what's happened in the last 10 years is amazing, but it was all up here. So for all of us, right? For life.
for all of us. Absolutely. Mindset is so much of everything, but tell me how it showed up negative for you.
So at that time when I made a move over, I was turning 30. I was married. How it showed up negative for me is that speaking to how women showed up, I really wanted to prove myself over and over again. And I lost sight of who I was because I let everybody's expectations and ideas, and even some of my own projections about that show up. And I became a workhorse to a point to where I had no boundaries. And I thought that was my identity. And anxiety entered, like a lot of it. And I didn't even know I was having panic attacks. I had no idea what anxiety was. I just thought, you know what? I should be able to take on more and more. And I got really lost between the ages of 30 and 32. And I just tried to work my way through it. And I also got into long distance running because I was ready to make a career move at that time up. And I wanted to go, it was a hybrid role. So I always earned a base salary and then I got a bonus or commission. But in our industry, the pathway is really the brokerage side of being more commission driven. And that ownership I was scared of because I lacked self-worth. And so that little piece of time, I was gaining all these amazing skill sets. I had a lot of value. People were pouring that into me and showing me, but I didn't believe it. And so I was an under earner. Even though I was doing all these things and I was supporting people who were earning, like I was helping them earn. I felt so comfortable in that role to help other people shine that when I got stressed and I was overworking myself and I had no boundaries, I did go internal and I internalized being hidden is safe. I'm not supposed to be a leader. Like this is where I really belong. This is the best place for me. And that shutdown process led me to anxiety and it led me to a detachment that I carried around for about 5 years.
Yeah. And that's so easy to do, right? Especially as women, when we want to get, we feel good supporting people. We feel good lifting people up. We feel good creating community. It's part of how we're wired and what makes us successful. But sometimes, that to your point, crossing that line between, being the, the wind beneath everybody else's sails, right? And soaring yourself gets that can be a scary transition.
And how it showed up for me, talking about stress again and anxiety, is I led to a lot of patterning with self-sabotage at that time in my life. And I was a victim. I had a victim mindset. Even though like things were perceived well, I knew where I was at on the inside. And again, I was an under earner for what I was doing, but I was scared to step out. I didn't know my worth. I didn't know how to have conversations. And so it felt comfortable to sit at that time in that space. But like I missed so much that could have happened and I have to let that go. And around the age of 34, so I'm divorced. I am an under earner. I'm living in a 500 square foot apartment. I'm in an amazing industry. I have like a team I'm working with and I'm like, she's a top earner. I'm not, but she is. So the perception is that I am. And I was a mess. I had, again, anxiety. I was having panic attacks. I felt disconnected from what I was doing and I felt stuck and I was just looping like this. And I had a shift occur where I just surrendered. I literally finally was like, I don't have answers. And I started reading I got a mentor, and I went to started seeing a therapist, and I got diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And so I started this movement forward, and the first step was accountability. And so I feel like for women out there, so much of the movement that could happen and the openness for our path and purpose really lies, no matter what's happening, is saying, I was a part of all of this that I've created.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, getting support and accountability along the way is really important. And I mean, I think we really, in our society, we tend to underplay that at times because, we have this, the American way of, the tough individualist that I can conquer anything and I could do anything, which is true. But very rarely, if you pull apart stories, do people do all of that alone? I mean, the top athletes have coaches and support. Many of the top executives now in companies have coaches or people that support them. Whether you need a therapist or a doctor or a coach or an accountability partner or whatever it is that you need, we all need someone that has our back and that can act as a sounding board to help us see where we are falling into to your point, victim mentality or an anxiety disorder or some other distortion that we're creating ourselves.
Yes. And that's been a step because there's a quote by Jamie Lynn, I'm sorry, I cannot remember her name. It's like going blank, but the founder of It Cosmetics. And it's that we always fall to the level we're comfortable to. So I was seeking support, but guess who? It was for people that love me no matter what I was doing. And I've learned now that when you are at that stuck, you have to go around people that are where you want to be and be told, hey, you're not cutting it. Like you're maybe not good enough right now. And that has to be received without the critical mind, but with that learning mind, right? And that childlike thing of like, this is just a correction and like move forward. And I was missing that too. I was like looking for affirmation for the state I was in and I wasn't getting out. And when I got, the right, I'll say team at that time, I did go inward. I pulled way back in order to create boundaries, which I didn't have. And none of that is super important. Yeah, I didn't have them with a lot. And so I think that's important as far as every time I've had a major pivot in my life of growth, is I have to go inward a little bit and tune things out. And that's TV, social media. Like I know have like a pattern of that to set myself up and support myself. But I learned that when I was 34, 35. And so from there, within a year of that time frame, I changed jobs. I bought my first home. I got out of debt and I hit 6 figures. Like a year.
Awesome. That's incredible. It's amazing how fast we can make things happen when we make those shifts though.
Yes. And it's, in running, like I believe in exercise. I believe in that, but to touch on for women or for me, my story, this is not for all. When I had started running, I did create this detachment of doing and running my way through things as a way to kind of build my confidence. And through all of that phase of high anxiety, I did have health problems show up. Like my body started withholding and reacting to what I wasn't able to solve for. And I started piecing that and putting it together when I was 35, and self-care, knowing how to shut down, give yourself rest and grace are part of things I have to allow myself to do when I'm getting all the signals that I would not do when I was younger. And I won't even speak to what happened, but it was so like, it makes me a little bit tearful because I do see that in other women and us as a collective that we will put ourselves so far last, even if we are higher achievers, ambitious or not, and we just ignore our bodies so much. And then we pay for that. And then we can pay a big price.
We can. Absolutely. It's funny because even at little things sometimes, I was at a Raiders retreat this last weekend and I was giving a talk to, up and coming writers about my books and, the release of those. And one of the things that happened to me around the release of my books was that I got sick. Like my body actually was just like, okay, no, but I don't like this. I'm not comfortable. We're going to, and it didn't happen the last time because, I was aware, to your point, I was aware of it. I put the pattern together and I took care of myself and I said, okay, I know this is what I need to do in order for this not to happen. But it's really interesting how our bodies respond to different things. And, unless we're really paying attention, we're not even aware of what they're doing.
No, we separate, right? It's still that this must be because I'm not doing this enough. Or like there's always this other angle of doing and it's kind of societal a little bit. And then it's just part of us always being able to show up and take care of other people and push that away. And that can be weight gain or weight loss. And then it can get to health, like real stuff, like getting sick on multiple levels. And there's a lot of talk around self-care now. Like it's a lot of talk, but I don't think it's about getting your nails done and massages. Like there's a lot more to that. Like that's a little nice aspect, I think, of personal maintenance. But when I talk about real self-care, it's like that deep work that keeps you showing up for yourself and being able to move forward without getting sick. And then you're like, now I'm down for 4 days, but I'm going to go right back to the patterns I had or the habits.
Yeah, because I just need to take a break. I need to get better. I need to pop some pills, like, whatever it is. I'm not feeling well. Let me take some ibuprofen and move on.
Yes. Yeah.
And we do that. And, somebody said to me the other day, well, people always want, do you show up at work sick? And I remember I was certainly, when I was sick or when people on my staff were sick, I was always like, stay home. First of all, your body's telling you need something, you need to rest. And secondly, we don't need to share our germs. Yeah.
Yeah. And, there's a season for that too, right? A cold and all that stuff is the body's natural response. So I do work through that because it's all relative. My stuff was like, I had kidney shut down. I had like cancer cells. Like I had big stuff from chronic stress. Yeah. So those things, autoimmune stuff shows up. So I'm more of an advocate of like, that's prolonged things,
Yes.
But so within that year, so all of the stuck I had felt when I made the move, I all of a sudden realized the skill set I had that other people saw that I wasn't quite aware of because I'd been doing the same thing for so long. And I started having conversations about just money and time and value. And that was pivotal during that next 2 years is because I could speak about my worth. Like the connection was made. And it was like a chess match. Like instead of being fearful of what if they say no, I was like, if they don't, I can walk away. Or I would pivot back with something else. So what about this combination? It became the negotiation that I was doing for my clients, but not for myself. And guess what? The worth was there. So it did happen. Like it did, like when I was asking for it, because I could place it for the value that it was. And I had the experience to show up and the confidence. And I don't know like what that says, but it's so encouraging for others because we're so shy to speak up sometimes in a room. And I don't think men are, especially young men. They're so confident, even if they have no skills yet. And we just say, okay. But learning that and just going for it and not having the fear behind it was a big shift after that time in my life during 2014, actually about 10 years ago.
Which is really amazing. And I love to hear when we get to that point and you learn to embrace really all your skills and all the possibilities, which just sounds like you did. So there's a couple of other places I want to go with us. But I'm just curious about one thing, where you are now and what you're doing. And clearly it's something you're very good at. And that's something that you love to do because I can tell it shows up on your face. But how does that connect with what you thought you were going to be when you were younger.
So when I was younger, I was told I was flighty. I was a free spirit. I was too emotional to ever be like corporate, like forget the corporate world. And this is in my 20s, because I would get chewed up. I was
Interesting.
Yeah, yes. I was told I should be a veterinarian or be an animal rescue person, which I've always had a heart for animals, but yeah. And so I worked 3 jobs in high school. So there's that theme, right, showing up of like all these interests, let me do it all. And I would wait tables when I got turned 18, I always waited tables for my main money. And so that was kind of the sales. And again, I loved people and interacting and variety. And I liked the freedom because I could pop in and come out. And freedom has always been huge for me to feel that I have flexibility and freedom. So that is another theme.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've kind of actually really built on your strengths in creating, your strengths and your values in creating this career for yourself.
I think so, because in commercial real estate on the 10 or up side, your product is people. You are moving and you are integrated into the company about their vision, their mission, and then you're using the real estate to support that. And I love it. And I like dealing with a number of different layers of people and personalities. And the one thing that I do feel was a skill set of mine that nobody maybe understood how I could transition in the business, because real estate was a certain, like people had a certain idea and they still do. But what's evolved is the people side of it. And corporate real estate, it is people centric. It's solution oriented. It's strategy planning. It's being able to take something as a whole and streamline it. And all the stuff that I learned how to do with all the jobs and, fire drills, I do that all the time. I just do it a different way. But all the jobs I took, yes, they were lining up to be able to handle just complex problems and have a different viewing of it, and then be able to get people to agree. Persuasion is a skill set I'm very good at, and getting people at different levels to all align and feel cohesive is it plays out beautifully with what I do, alongside with being able to manage different companies at the same time and different products, because I work in retail, I work in office, I work in industrial. So yes, when everybody was telling me you're too flighty and you're too free-spirited, well, those things could also be seen as, able to multitask, able to, handle different concepts and be able to pivot and look at strategies. So that's how they showed up later.
Which is awesome. And, it's interesting that it's so often that what people tell us are our biggest weaknesses often are truly our biggest strengths, if we can learn how to use them right.
Yes. And also evolving, here I am now, I keep getting different layers shown to me. I'm a believer, and I don't know, not everyone has a higher source they believe, but I do. And so as I mature, yes, I'm in my mid 40s, but as I'm still maturing, I'm still growing and expanding. And I believe that's a lifelong gift that we have. There's always new sides of myself, like new patterns, like, wow, that doesn't work for me anymore. And that flexibility with yourself without the rigidity is, I feel like it's a fuller life. Like I'm always grateful about my life, even if the happiness may be a little bit up and down because of circumstances during a season. And yeah, it's still learning, still growing.
I'm a little bit older than you are, and I'm still learning and still growing, and I plan to be doing that until, I'm not here anymore, because, there's times when I'm like, oh my God, haven't I learned enough lessons? Aren't I done yet? But at the same time, A, I know I'll never be done, and B, I don't really want to be, because to your point, every time I discover something else, every time I conquer a different challenge, every time I unpeel a layer of knowledge or insight about myself that can help me be a better person, it's exciting. And it's like, okay, it opens up more possibilities for what I can do with my life. And I think that's the most exciting thing about it for me is
Yes.
as I free myself from, to your point, the restrictions, other possibilities open.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I will say those things were positive and served me, but it took a while. Um, and there was some self-sabotage, like patterning I had to mature through. So although those were taking a longer to develop and show up, what was hurting me during my 20s was, can I wait this out to see how long, right? Bouncing around. And I think that's a theme too for younger generations is I'm not getting what I want right now. I'm going to bounce. I'm going to bounce. And there's paths you can take, right? Like you can go strictly after money and that is okay. But is the end game, what does that mean for you?
Yeah.
Like, what is the money about? Because you could get the money and then be like, that's it. Like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
And you can do the long haul and just stay in the safe zone. And that's okay if that works for you. But, and then you can do, like, I've always done this hybrid, but there is a success or like, piece that you do have to stick with something and see it through. And some of the language or like the social media push of like success loves speed, I believe all of that, but consistency over a period of time is also huge.
Because consistency, consistency and persistence is important because we live in such a world of instant gratification. And to your point, I think the younger generations have grown up with that maybe a little bit more than we did because of just the speed at which things are moving today. But there still is the long game. There still is being consistent, being persistent. You talked about long distance running and, I used to run also. And, you don't get from not working out at all to running a marathon in 2 weeks. Right?
Yeah.
That's not gonna happen. You have to train, you have to get in shape, you have to do all the things to get yourself there. And we forget about that sometimes. We just want, okay, I want this. Why don't I have it right now?
Yes. And it's that in-between dialogue for myself, because I would say that, and then we sometimes go in a victim mindset or not take accountability with what is the outcome? Why don't I have the outcome? Well, where is the consistency? Where are you out of alignment? And there were a lot of times I would get so out of alignment because I was busy. And this is still kind of a habit of mine too, because I have a lot going on in my life. And I don't really ever say I'm busy, like, because everybody's busy, right? It's all relative to what your life looks like. But I will have to sit down and re-examine my goals because sometimes things look exciting and I say yes. And then I'm like, whoa. And so I'm out of alignment. And then I'm like, what happened? I'm not meeting my goals or outcome. Well, the consistency's gone along with the focus. And so that goes with creating this full life, right? Like work is work and your career. And then there's the life you're building. And I love Jesse Itzler. I'm a big fan of his, but he has Building Your Life resume. And so that like all the things I do, it's because I like variety and I want full life and I want to be connected and contributing. And so building that life resume while you're trying to build your career and show up for yourself, there is a balancing act to that you have to maybe re-examine your values as you're moving through life. And some people they think they know what their values are and they really don't. If you sit down and put them on paper. And then you're like, well, no wonder you're like, you don't even know what yours are. Cause like you could tell,
Yeah, 100%. So guys, there's 50 million questions I want to ask you, but let's just talk. I mean, when I looked at your bio and I read a little bit about your bio at the beginning, you not only have, your career and everything you're doing with that, but you have some other things that you're passionate about, including your scholarship and some of the other things. So how does that play into your life? And to your point, create your life resume, but also inform your values, your balance, and how you're approaching your career.
So I've always had a heart towards women. My mother did not have a lot of opportunities and grew up drastically different in a number of ways. And so I think seeing some of that as a child and now being an adult, my way of giving back to women is honoring her in some ways for the ways that she maybe never allowed herself to show up, was too scared. And knowing who I was as a child, I grew up in Abilene, which is in West Texas, and it's a small city, but I didn't have a lot of self-worth or confidence, but it took a long time to build, and pouring that into young women and just women in general. Like, I think just women across the board, because I see a lot of women that are older than me or younger, and everybody wants to be seen. And so I really love to feel that connection with a female, no matter where it's at or what it is. It gives me like joy, and I feel connected to God when I do that. So the scholarship in 2021, coming off COVID, it was, everybody was shut down on and in, and kind of everybody had their experience. And one of mine was that I've always been a giver. I've always donated. It's just part of I believe you should always give back monetarily. And so that's been a part. Even when I made no money, I did it. So the scholarship was finding a female that was similar to me in my high school and just honoring them, because I got a lot of little scholarships. I decided to go to college literally in March of my senior year. My mom did not go to school. My dad went to school, seminary and college when we were little. And so, it just wasn't like grades weren't talked about. It was more like work. Like, how are you going to work? How are you going to support yourself? And school is here. Yeah. So when I made the choice to go to college, I was like scrambling because I didn't know what I was doing, and I got loans and but I got little scholarships. And every time somebody validated that I was smart enough to do this, I was like, oh, it was just a little piece forward. And I want to be able to do that. And it's like, it's part of our story. And so the Phenomenal Woman Scholarship, I love Maya Angelou. I love her life's work. And I just thought that would be so cool to pour words, because words are life. And I started that in 21, and I go home every May, that second week of May, and I get to honor who the young woman is. And they're on a college bound track, and they're all different. It doesn't matter what they're going to major in, as long as they work during high school, they do sports or some sort of extracurricular, and they can be a B or A student, because I was a B student.
I love that. And I love how you're, to your point, aligning yourself with your values in more than one area of your life. And that's so important. And, I think for me, one of the ways that I love supporting women and talking about them, and, honestly, my books are about a woman in corporate aligning with her values and how she does that. So that's really just such a core aspect of what I do, and what I want for myself and what I want for others. And it's so, to your point, it's so easy to get pulled out of alignment by chasing the next shiny object, or by saying, well, I'm just going to do this for now, and then I'll get back to things, or whatever excuses we come up with to get out of alignment. And that's not a judgment thing. It's life. I mean, we do that, and it's part of, I think, being human. Is one of the ways that we learn sometimes what our values are is by getting out of alignment with them and saying, whoa, wait, this doesn't feel good. What's going on? So we learn as much by getting out of alignment with our values as we do in staying in alignment with them.
And I wonder for you, can I ask you a question?
Sure, go right on.
So even now, but when I was younger, my need for validation and affirmation was so high that some of the reason I didn't know my values and would act out of alignment is I started seeking validation, and it wasn't from God. And so I would say yes because I needed it. And it was not even, it had nothing to do with, it could be a person, a group. And here we go.
Yeah.
And I still have to catch myself, because I still do that because I want to be validated. And I don't know if that's more women driven, or did you have an experience?
Yes, I absolutely had that experience. And I think I think that's a human experience because I see men that do it too. I mean, it's part of our need as humans to connect. I think it's stronger in women, to your point. I think women, because we're sort of maybe less so now with the younger generations, but I think with, with a lot of women, we were brought up that that's what we were supposed to do, to look for that validation externally, because that's how we please other people. That's how we make other people happy, right? By, doing something for them, with them, that makes them say, oh, yes, you're a good girl now, right? The whole good girl thing. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to get pulled off track. And I think, yes, I still get pulled off track sometimes. And I get still pulled off track where I'm chasing something else other than what the value is. Unfortunately, I think the good news for me is I catch myself quicker now.
Yes, but no, and I know, sir, speaking to that, the giving, now that I've moved into a different phase in my career and I have a son who's 5, seeing him and how he operates is always a reflection of how I'm showing up. So there's been a maturing in my need to give and where I give, and expand again on a different level. So I've been working on that. But in some of the other organizations I'm involved with, they are women driven, but the goal for me is still to be involved in the community. But 2 of the groups I'm in outside of the Phenomenal Womanist Scholarship is a giving, and then I'm also a mentor for the Urban Gale School. And my little mentee just got a full ride to her university of choice. And, I mean, it's amazing. So she is an immigrant and her family is too. And this school it just supports a number of different women coming up, and they have 100% graduation rate and 100% college acceptance. So I got to be a part of her journey and help her. And that was amazing. But the other 2 groups, my grandmother died in 2021 and I wasn't super close to her, but in coming up, there was always a disconnect of who my family was and my ancestry. And I loved my family, but I didn't have this lineage that some people spoke of. And I was always attracted to that because it felt grounding and more successful. So you mentioned at the top of the podcast, when we started the podcast, about what success looks like. When she died, I started researching our lineage because I wanted to know if there was a cohesive line. I wanted to understand and have this grounding for myself. And I connected my mother's line back to the original 300 that founded Texas. And It's 9th generation thing. So I became a daughter of the Texas Republic. Yeah, I found out that I have a long line of preachers in my family. I found out for my dad's side that they came over from Ireland and were part of the American Revolution. And I found all these women that had resilience, that had just the decisions they made allowed me to be here now. And that gave me goosebumps because
I'm getting goosebumps. Okay. I mean, that is so cool.
Okay. Yeah. And so this brokenness, and we haven't even touched on that, but that allowed a different part of me to start showing up after 2021 of who I am and how important it is to honor our ancestors and move through the things they couldn't, or maybe they didn't have availability to do, or they were cut short. And so some of the work I'm doing now is to honor that. And so the DRT and the DAR, it seems people are like, what's the big deal? And all, it's because you can't live in the past because you'll stay stuck, but you most certainly can honor the past and know that you are here and you are a product of all the work everybody did for you to be. And I get emotional, but it gets me excited. And so when looking at young women, I also respect your elders, know who you came from. And if you have a broken lineage, that's okay. It starts with you. You're going to be the first one that creates this space going forward. And I'm like, oh, I get so emotional about it. But
I love that. And then it's so beautiful. And I know we could talk, Pepsi, I feel like we could talk for 3 more hours, but we do have to keep this a little bit tight. So I'm going to wrap this up and just say thank you so much for being with us and sharing your story. I know you've been so inspirational, and I would love for you to share how people can get in touch with you if they would like to.
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn, just Pepsi Windland. I'm on Instagram as well, Pepsi Windland. But reach out that way, DM me, and then we can connect at whatever makes sense and is supportive for the conversation going forward.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for being on the show, Pepsi. And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. If you would like to learn more about me, my books, my values, and services, you can check that out at daringtotranscend.com, or you can always find me also on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out. Take care, and we'll see you next week.